Cult Cinema Podcast.
The 1,000-year hike needs 1,000-year soldiers.
Arrêtez, s'il vous plaît.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode 22 of the Cult Cinema Podcast. I'm Gage.
I'm Ashley.
And this week we are continuing our little thing that we're doing for this month, and that's reviewing and going over movies that we think are going to be cult classics in the future. Last week we did Ashley's pick, which was The Old Guard, and this week we are doing my pick, which is Overlord.
Still surprised you picked it.
Yes, released in 2018, directed by Julius Avery. This was a movie that I just came across one day while looking up what movies were showing in theaters, because I had never heard of it. I read a brief plot synopsis, saw that J.J. Abrams had produced it, and I was like, how have I not heard of this movie up until now?
Yeah.
And so me and my buddy Mike went to go see it, and it's now one of my favorite kind of horror thriller movies right now. So
It is really good.
yeah, it's pretty solid. So I'm really excited to go into everything. I wasn't able to find a lot in terms of like behind the scenes kind of trivia stuff. Maybe I just wasn't looking in the right places. But yeah, I mean, a couple things here and there. It was like, it's still one of the, like, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it today. It seemed like it's been well received by critics from what I can see. Overall, it's one of those things that I feel like kind of flew under a lot of people's radar. So I'm happy that we get to cover it here.
I agree. It's definitely a cult horror for sure. I follow a lot of horror podcasts. They've covered it on, numerous ones. So yeah, for sure. If you're into horror, you know it. But if you're not, probably never heard of it.
Yeah. All right. So unless you have any opening thoughts, figure we can go ahead and jump into the scene by scene here.
Nope. Sure thing.
All right.
So we open on essentially what looks like war propaganda. If you've ever seen, footage from this era, World War II, it's pretty similar. Black and white war transmission you can kind of hear over the credits. But then we immediately cut into a chopper with a bunch of soldiers. And this is when we first meet Boyce and a couple of the other main characters. I'll kind of list off as we come across them. But he is our essential main guy for the most part. And then we also meet Chase. He's actually a photographer. He's not a soldier. And then my favorite person of the movie, Corporal Ford, who is...
It's Wyatt Russell, Kurt Russell's son.
Wyatt Russell. Yep. And fucking dreamy as hell.
Yeah. He was the only real actor that I kind of recognized from anything else. Me too. Looking up some of the other cast members, it looked like they had still been in a good amount of stuff. I know that a good chunk of these actors were also in Game of Thrones at one point, as well as one of the stunt actors. I don't remember who exactly, but yeah, it's...
Grey Worm, who's a very popular character from Game of Thrones, is Dawson, but he only has a 10-minute scene, maybe. That poor son of a bitch. Yeah. But yeah, he was in Game of Thrones. Tibbet, the actor who plays Tibbet, he's been in a bunch of other stuff, more like mob related.
Okay.
He's in.
I mean, he's
Saints of Newark.
He plays the good, stereotypical. Hey, I'm from Brooklyn kind of.
Yeah.
Guy,
For sure, he does. He plays that well.
Yeah.
So yeah, after we meet Corporal Ford, and they're all just kind of bullshitting back and forth, and then their sergeant comes in and explains where they're going and why, which is a small town in France to destroy a transmission tower. It's going to block out the Nazis' communication, so they need to get there and take it out because the actual Battle of Normandy, which is a true life event, is happening in the morning. So they got to get there, obviously, take that out.
And the code, the code word for, I think, the Battle of Normandy was Operation Overlord.
It was.
Hence the name of the movie.
Yeah. But pretty cool.
Yeah.
for back then too, for sure.
Yeah. I also, anytime I looked up the name of the movie to try to watch it, I kept getting redirected to this anime called Overlord, which I know nothing about and don't think it has any affiliation with this movie. But
yeah, I kept getting the my Google search is so random. There's true crime, there's movies, there's historical issues, there's biology for my work. So it actually kept taking me to historical sites because this is named after an actual historical event that actually happened. So I kept getting a lot of that, and I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know either it was named that. So that's pretty cool too, for sure. And I will say the cinematography in this movie is fucking brilliant. It's really beautiful and well done.
Visuals too. It's also
yes, extremely. The next thing we see, hear rather, are booms. They start out subtle and then get really loud, and we quickly see these are bombs, of course, being hurled at these planes as they get closer to landing. Lots of planes are already being shot down too before they even get to where they are going, which is fucking terrifying because not only am I afraid of flying, but just picture being in a plane that you don't really want to be in anyway, and then it fucking gets shot down and you're dead.
Yeah. Isn't it supposedly like a war crime if you shoot paratroopers while they're in the air or something like that? I thought I remember reading something along those lines. The same way
sure
it was
it's all considered that.
Yeah, considered like a war crime to shoot a medic in the field or something like that.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Yeah.
I should ask my dad, but I'm sure you're right. Again, back then, warfare is just so different as it is now, too. So, Boyce is like me and super uneasy and does not want to be in this fucking plane anymore. But then all of a sudden, the whole back end of the plane gets blown up and it just starts to free fall. More bombs we see taking out the planes. Then bullets start flying through the bottom of this plane and they hit some poor dude, who's just freaking out, and he dies instantly.
Yeah.
A red light flips on and all of them start to jump out of the plane, which at this point is kind of pointless because you're already going down.
Right.
But they luckily are paratroopers, like you were saying, and they have parachutes, so they're supposed to get to the ground safely.
And we see a bunch of people that are just getting sucked out through the back of the plane. And apparently there was a prop plane that was built, a huge prop plane that was built that was actually, I read this on IMDb trivia, but it's so insane I have trouble believing that it's actually true. They built a prop plane with the back end that actually was cut off and lit on fire, and there are actual stunt doubles sliding out the back through the fire.
I could see it.
Yeah, but it's just I read that as the first thing on IMDb trivia, and I was like, holy shit. And then everything else was historical contradictions.
Yeah. I got one piece of trivia from IMDb, but it's not, it's kind of okay, yeah, I see that. But yeah, IMDb. we all know what you're doing out there. Boyce almost doesn't make it out of the plane, though, but he gets picked up by the sergeant and essentially pushed out of the plane. And this sequence of seeing him free fall and then hit the water,
just all one single take, just
one take. Clearly, it is. You can tell, but it's wonderfully done. So, very suspenseful. He does open his parachute in time before he hits the water, though, but it's so close. Literally, he opens it, falls right in the water, and he goes down to the bottom because of course he does, and he has to cut himself off of this parachute in the water, which is also fucking terrifying.
I hate underwater scenes. Because I hate being in the ocean. I just
Me too.
being underwater. I just feel so uneasy.
I'm cool in a pool.
Yeah,
I'm fine, but
the ocean.
Fuck
is
some
so
ocean
huge.
stuff.
Yeah.
Nope, can't do it. He does get out though. Luckily, he manages to cut himself free. But in the meantime, he has taken off all of his gear for the most part, so that doesn't help him either. And he gets to the shore, and just as soon as he thinks he's okay, more fucking bullets start flying at him, so he has to run away from that area as quickly as he can. He starts to slowly creep around the forest, though, and it's dark at this point. He's just trying to find anyone else that survived, of course. He does come across 2 dudes that had not. They didn't open their parachutes in time. They unfortunately died there. And then we see the sergeant who is captured by the fucking Nazis. And I'm not going to talk about the Nazis without saying fucking Nazis because y'all are pieces of shit. So
Do they? I don't even think they say the word Nazi in this. They maybe say it like once.
They say it a handful of
Do
times.
they? I don't. I know that they're like you don't see a single swastika in the entire movie.
No, that's on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't. I like rarely remember them hearing like saying the word Nazi more often than just German.
I'm pretty sure they said it like 5 times, maybe.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. But every time they say it, it's in a disparaging way, like, fuck the Nazis.
Yeah.
So,
of course.
that's exactly how I'm going to say it.
I don't think there is another way to talk about Nazis, at least another right way. But
there absolutely is not.
Yeah.
For sure. It's just like when you're referring to people who are racist. Fuck racists. Y'all deserve to burn in hell.
You heard it
All
here
right,
first,
anyway.
folks.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm standing by it. Anyway, before Boyce can get to his sergeant, though, Ford tackles him and basically is like, he's fucking dead, leave him go. And, of course, he gets shot and killed, which is sad. But the 2 of them pick up and keep going. And as they're going through this forest, we look up and we can see, unfortunately, a handful of other soldiers who got caught in the trees and they are dead. Ford is like, we just got to keep moving, got to keep pushing forward. And Boyce is like, hey, man, I had friends on that plane. And Ford's like, well, friends die. Fucking get on with it. Like, keep going. I get his persona and I get his hard attitude for sure.
Yeah.
And more times than not, that's a really good way to be, especially in a situation like this. You need that person to be like, no, keep going, no emotion. So I get it. But Boyce is the complete opposite of Ford when it comes to that. And I do like the parallel in the characters for sure. They do end up finding 3 others. Chase, of course, with the camera. Tibbet, the New York guy. And Dawson, who is Grey Worm, like I said earlier. They, kind of are relieved, kind of bullshitting back and forth, and Chase flashes his fucking camera, and Ford kind of goes to compliment him on it, but then immediately breaks it. Yeah. He's like, this is a fucking spotlight on your neck, bro. No. Not good. They also meet up with Jacobs, and I forget the other guy's name. I don't know. There's 5 total, though, in this scene as they start walking towards the town where the tower is. Dawson starts talking about how he's going to write this book and this will make a good chapter in it. And unfortunately, he steps on a fucking landmine and immediately is dead. Which a lot of deaths in this movie are just that quick.
Yeah, very sudden. Not a lot of time for like real emotional reaction from the characters.
Nope. And they catch you, the viewer, completely off guard.
Yeah.
I think I've seen this movie 5-6 times, still fucking caught off guard by this instance of this dude being completely blown to pieces. Boyce is tossed, though, pretty far away, obviously, it's a mine, and he is super dazed, but Ford is screaming at him to walk right towards him on a fucking tightrope line, basically, because you are in a minefield and you have to, get out of it safely.
Yeah.
Tibbet is to the left a little bit, and he asks if anyone's going to help him, and Ford is like, use your bayonet, do light taps, not too hard, and walk towards me too. And Tibbet's like, well, how hard's too hard? And Ford's like, you'll fucking know.
Yeah, you'll know because you'll be dead if you do it wrong.
Yeah. So now the 4 of them come across something dead in the field. They literally can't figure out what it is. At first they think it's a dog, but no, it's too big to be a dog, but it's clearly been, maimed, and it's gross looking as well when you see it on the camera. Boyce then sees something in the dark, and they all hear it at that point and turn. But it's a young woman, and she takes off running because she's probably scared shitless and doesn't know who the fuck they are, so she's trying to get out of there. Ford's like, she can't tell anyone we're here, grab her. So Boyce takes off after her, eventually catching up to her. She goes to cut Boyce, though, with a knife, and Ford sticks a gun in her face and tells her to stop. So she's like, okay. And this is when we learn that Boyce speaks French. And he tells her that she's safe and it's fine. And Ford then starts asking questions to Boyce. Is that your village? Are there many Germans there? She spits on the ground when he says Germans, so we know she hates them too. Ford then tells Boyce to have her lead them to her village and her house, which she does. When they start to get close, she says they're going to find her house. It's just her brother, and her aunt. And Ford says, well, he's going to go see if she's telling the truth. And he kind of branches off for a second and tells Boyce to stay with her. But unfortunately, she makes a noise. And instead of getting caught, she pushes Boyce into like this ditch kind of surrounding. I'm assuming it's like surrounding the entire area. Village.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a trench. And then a neighbor sticks her head out and starts yelling at her. And then blows a fucking whistle to alert the Nazis that she's in the village.
What a rat.
Right. I get it. People are scared of the Nazis, but
yeah, snitches get stitches.
Absolutely. Especially in wartime.
Yeah.
She could cut you. That'd be okay. They do obviously approach her, though, and she appeases them, and they search her. But she's what they call a scavenger. She's clearly going out when she shouldn't be to probably find food or, you know, something that she can eat or provide for her family. But then the fucking asshole of the film, Captain, honestly, I can't pronounce the last name.
Is it
We're just going to call him asshole Nazi.
Waffner, I think, something.
Sure. Waffner? I'm going to go with that. That sounds German as fuck.
I know Ford just calls him Franz, just like generic German name, which is what I thought his name was through most of the movie. But no, it's Waffner.
No. Yeah. I'm going to call him asshole German Nazi or asshole Captain Nazi, something along those lines. I didn't bother to put his last name down. Because fuck the Nazis.
Fair enough.
Saying it again. He stops them, though, and lets her go. So clearly he's sweet on her, or whatever you want to call it. Her name's Chloe, though. We find that out here in a second. They eventually do get to her house, and Tibbet's like, she didn't tip him off, and Boyce is like, no, I think she hates the Germans just as much as we do, so I think we're fine. But at this moment, she starts speaking English, so, you know, the communication there is getting a little better. When they get inside of Chloe's house, they're trying to be quiet, but we hear this really primal grunting sound, and she says it's her aunt, and she's really sick, so just don't go upstairs, leave her alone.
It sounds like a dying bear is in that room. Like
That's a good analogy. Yeah. It definitely sounds like an old person sick.
Yeah. But it's...
I mean, there's no other way to describe it.
Well, it sounds like just how deep like the growlings are and everything.
It definitely doesn't sound like it's coming from a woman. That's for sure. And you can tell Ford at that moment when they all hear it. It's very loud. And he looks at her like, that's not a fucking person.
Yeah.
Like,
this is the first like hint that we get, because like you go into it knowing that you're going to be watching a monster movie, but this is like the first hint that you get, and they don't really do much more with this, like, you know, the grandma behind the door. Like, we get a small segment later on, but
yeah. But no, this poor woman is just dying up there, essentially. But also just then a little boy pops out of nowhere, scaring the shit out of Tibbet and everyone else, because I forgot this little kid was in here. And this is Paul. This is Chloe's little brother. He's probably 10, 11. Ford then asks if the aunt's going to be a problem, and she says no, she hasn't come out of that room since she came back from the tower. So we know that she went there. And then Ford starts to ask her about the tower, and she's just like, I don't know what's in there, but trucks go in and out all the time. They don't let people go in there. Sometimes they just drag people away from their house and take them there, and so, you know, it's terrible. Just then we do hear screaming, though, and the fucking Nazis are dragging some poor people out of their home, minding their goddamn business, and they just shoot the guy right there in the street and leave him there and take the woman. So
is it they shoot the guy or they shoot the woman? I thought it was the woman that got shot.
They shoot the guy and take the woman.
Okay.
they put her in the truck and I assume take her to the tower. So I'm assuming most of the people in this village who are now dead ended up there for sure. Tibbet then kind of goes on a rant about how, there's only fucking 3 of us technically because Boyd's useless and Chase is useless and, that sucks. And
well, I think at this
like,
point it's Ford, Tibbet, Chase, and Boyd, because Jacob is still in the tower.
Jacob gets captured because when Dawson exploded, he also got thrown, but I don't know if he got thrown really far or what happened, but he
I don't know if
Jake.
I don't think Jacob was in the beginning. Now, come to think of it, I thought it was just Tibbet, Dawson, and Chase that Boyd and Ford come in contact with, and then Jacob, I think he says something about like they pulled like when he hit the ground, like after paired. Like
you might be right. I thought there was 5. There might have just been 4 of them. I keep thinking Jacob's there, so.
Well, because he shows up after Boyd eventually infiltrates the tower and finds him there. But
right. But yeah, Tibbet's like, we're fucked basically. We should just get out of here. And Boyce is like, you heard the sergeant, and he died, so we gotta finish this mission. And then Tibbet says, Boyce, you can even kill a mouse, and tells the story about how Boyce was ordered to kill a mouse in their bunk, and it got caught in his shoe, and he let it out in a field, and it just came right back, and it kept pissing off the bunkmates because he didn't have the heart to kill it, basically. So we do realize Boyce is the heart of the group for sure. Ford orders Tibbet and Chase to go sneak back out of the village and see if anyone else made it to the rally point. And Paul pops up out of nowhere again, and he keeps talking French to Tibbet. And Tibbet makes fun of him, but Chloe's like, dude, stop. He just thinks all Americans like baseball. He's got a little baseball and a glove, and he just wants to play with them. He's a little kid, and it's sad.
And how does the character from Boston not like baseball? Isn't that like
exactly
or New York? Maybe not Boston, but New York. Clearly, he's from New England, somewhere in New England.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I don't like baseball, and I'm like, yes, you fucking do. Just don't be a dick. Like, you're just being mean now.
Yeah.
So Ford thanks Chloe finally, even though she told him, they gotta leave. Nazis do checks all night, and they just come in and do what they want. So you can't be stuck here because then I'll die and my family will die, which is, a reality. Ford then tells Boyce to go downstairs and make sure shit's cool because at this point they have all kind of made it up to the attic, so they can see not like a 360 view, but it's a better view being in the attic than, of course, being downstairs. So Boyce goes downstairs to try to smooth things out with Chloe. And he hears the aunt again, who at this point literally sounds like a zombie.
Yeah.
There's no other way to describe it. He kind of tries to peek in her room, and he hears something, looks away, and this is the first jump scare of the movie, and holy fuck, she is for sure turning into a zombie.
Yeah. But it's
stereotypical.
Right, skin clearly decaying, bloodshot eyes.
Blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprisingly didn't attack Boyd when he was sneaking, but I think it's one of those things where it's either going to turn you into, a mindless monster, or you're still going to you'll be fine, but, have these, skin will start to decay, strength will increase kind of thing.
It does seem to affect people in different ways. So... But again, just the same with like a vaccine or a poison, everybody's different. It's going to treat your body differently. So, but just then Chloe's like, hey, she's sick. Leave her alone, and shuts the door. And Boyce is like, what the fuck happened to her? Because that's not sick.
Yeah.
And Chloe's like, I don't know. When she came back from the church, she was like this, and she just locks herself in her room. So, that's sad for sure. She then offers to clean his wounds because he's kind of fucked up from the mine and falling, obviously.
Well, he got fucked up. Boyd gets fucked up because she stabbed him when she tried to catch him when he tried to catch her in the woods.
Oh, I forgot that. Yeah, she did stab him in the arm. As she's kind of patching him up, though, she tells him that she liked the mouse story, and He comments on her English being so good, and she said, well, I went to London to study to be a vet, but then the war happened, I had to come home, you know, stuff like that. Paul then rolls the baseball towards him, and Boyce speaks French to him, and Paul's obviously excited because he's like, oh, you speak French, which is cute. Chloe then says his French is different, and he explains, my grandma taught me, and she was an African taken from Haiti and then lived in Louisiana, and that's who taught me, which is pretty common for a lot of African Americans who do live in the South. Mm-hmm. A lot of them speak French. Especially at this time, for sure. Chloe then asks him if there's any war over there, and he says, definitely not like this. And then he asks her about her parents being taken. And she gets very emotional and says, well, they first took her father, and then her mother, because the German guy here running things thinks the tower has some sort of power. He keeps calling it his science, and he just keeps taking people there, and almost none of them ever come back. Obviously, though, it's just an excuse to experiment on people and kill them. So that's terrible. Asshole Nazi captain's back and knocks on Chloe's door. Boyce goes running back up to the attic with Ford, though, just in the nick of time. Paul goes to hide also because clearly whatever's about to happen, this poor kid knows the drill. He enters and then asks to see Chloe alone. And he almost acts in this scene like he's her husband coming home from a day of work and she should be doting on him. Yeah. And it's just fucking disgusting. He takes his like collar thingy off and he looks towards the stairs and he says, that's strange, no rabbit tonight? And she's like, no, I've been taking care of my aunt, didn't have time to cook you dinner, asshole Nazi. He then says, well, do you have a moment for us? And she kind of begs him, not tonight. So again, cringe. Yeah. He calls in a guard who essentially puts a gun in her face and obviously is going to force her to do whatever he wants. He then asks where Paul is, and she says that he's asleep. But just then Paul knocks a baseball down from the attic where he's again hiding, and this causes the guards to go look at this point. But luckily Paul just kind of stands at the top of the steps and rolls the ball down. He's being protective at this point too. And then puts his mitt up to catch the ball. And another asshole Nazi, I didn't catch his name either, he spits on the ball and then tosses it back and they all laugh, which is fucking gross.
Now, do you think that it was, I think it was probably probably reading too much into this, but I think the soldiers, you know, Boyd and Ford, or at least Ford, probably put the kid up to standing at the top of the steps. So that way they wouldn't come up all the way and they would just see, oh, it's just a kid up there.
Yeah, you're probably right. For sure.
I think, yeah. That's at least what I was inferring from that situation.
You're probably right, yeah. Because he is a small child. Like, how would he recognize that? Yeah. Then asshole Captain Nazi is like, well, maybe I'll take your brother if you don't want me to stay tonight. And she's like, oh my god, fine. Just stay. And he thanks the other guys and they leave. Again, he starts to undress and Boyce and Ford are still watching from the attic. Boyce is getting upset, but Ford's like, stop, you know, you can't do anything about this right now. And then he pushes Chloe onto a table and starts to sexually assault her. Yep. Not going to say the other word. We're moving off that. Because it doesn't happen. So, yeah. But clearly this has happened tons of times to this poor girl and it's terrible. And just as he tries to essentially go down on her, I guess that's the best way to describe it, Boyce sticks a gun to the back of his head and makes him stop. And Ford then pushes him back against the wall and pulls out a lighter. This is the only time you see any hint of a traditional Nazi memorabilia. It's not the swastika. It's the, like, emblem. I don't even know what you call it.
I don't know the name off the top of my head, but...
Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't matter because it should be a thing that's dead, so I don't care. But it's not a swastika, which we all know what that is. He asked him if his boss gave him this for meeting his execution quota, and then he just knocks the dude out and ties him up for the time being because, you know, at this point, what else are you going to do? Ford then tells Boyce to go find Tibbet and Chase because now they really have to move on that tower because this guy's important and they'll come looking for him soon, I'm sure. We then see Boyce kind of creep out close to the tower, but obviously he's just looking for Tibbet and Chase at this point. And he does see a bunch of Nazis taking sick people out. They're loaded on a truck and they're just like taking them out and forcing them out and lining them against the wall. And at first you think they're gonna just shoot them because that seems logical.
Yeah.
But no, they fucking whip out a flamethrower
and go to town,
mow all these people down. Yeah. And obviously that scares the shit out of Boyce because it would scare the shit out of me. Didn't know you had flamethrowers, other side. He takes off running, but just then a truck comes down the road, so he kind of dives off not to be seen. But unfortunately, there's a rabid dog right there who goes to obviously bite him, and he starts to run and just jumps into the back of this truck, which obviously wasn't a good idea either, but I don't know what else he would have done in this instance. But this fucking truck's full of dead bodies too, so that's super gross. And it goes right into the tower. Also probably not a good plan. Yeah. He quickly stacks a body on top of him though, trying to kind of hide because they do start taking the bodies out of the back. He does think fast though and gets out while they're not looking and kind of crawls under the truck to eventually make it inside, unseen somehow. This whole next 15 minutes or so, very intense. Yeah. Trigger warning ahead of time. Boyce starts making his way around this tower. We see more dead bodies. We hear awful screams coming from literally all over the place. There's also not that many places to hide either, so he has to be careful, and he's kind of like ducking in and out of little corridors and hallways. And then we see a gate, and he tries to get out of it, but then he hears some loud crying and coughing kind of coming from this wall, and all you see on this wall are like metal peepholes. It's the best way to describe them. And as he looks in the cell, it's a man trying to get out. And then we very quickly hear a side door open, and he has to go and hide again. But they watch as, I'm assuming, a Nazi officer and a doctor look in the peephole. They bang on the door. They yell something in German, and then we just hear the guy scream. And as you know, they're taking notes this whole time, so we're not sure what's happening on the other side of the wall. But they do leave. Boyce goes to look back in the hole, and the second jump scare of the movie, another fucked up looking face with a red eyeball. Yeah. Scares Boyce.
Keep in mind, we are just now halfway into the movie. And
that's literally my next note.
And are just finally getting to some actual, like, horror shit. Like, it was just a normal war movie for the past 50 minutes, and then it completely jumps into a horror film.
Yep.
That is one thing that I wish they would have, like, because apparently in the original script written by Billy Ray, not to be confused with Billy Ray Cyrus.
Good point.
That it was a lot more horror oriented in the original draft of the script, but I guess he originally started writing this back in like 2013. And then I think he met up with some like Abrams and a couple other producers, and it ended up getting changed a little bit more. But it makes the first half of this movie kind of feel very slow, and it doesn't feel like it really goes into the second act until halfway through the movie.
Right.
So I wish they would have done a little bit more, like maybe, or just like, because I feel like there's a good chunk of like the first part that they could just be cut out and just kind of have it the whole thing start a little bit sooner. But I don't know. Yeah,
fair enough. I like the end result for sure. I like the character building. It's not a lot of it, but it's some for sure. So after this jump scare, Boyce runs, and this is when he comes across the main communication tower. So he sees the room, he sees where it is. We then cut back outside to see more Nazis walking around the village, and now Tibbet and Chase are making their way back to Chloe's house. We cut back to Boyd, and he's in, again, some sort of makeshift lab area in this tower. And we see this, like, at first I thought it was a giant tar pit when I first saw this movie. But we soon find out that is just a giant hole where they've been dumping blood and body parts. So that's disgusting.
It's like the giant pit in Star Wars that the Emperor gets tossed down.
But also think about this logistically. How awful would it smell in there?
Oh, yeah.
You know? Not to mention what else is going on that we're going to get into, but just from that alone. You'd think you'd want, like, a lid.
Yeah.
Just saying. We see a bunch of large beakers with what clearly looks like blood in them. And then we see these, like, the best way to describe this is like a vacuum bag.
Yeah.
And it's got a hose going into it and then a zipper, like, closing it. He goes to open this bag, though, and a bunch of nasty liquid starts spilling out. And then some poor fucking person with this mask thing on their face, which is clearly locked to the face, begs for help. And it's just gross. The whole thing's super gross. Boyson sees the doctor from before, and he starts carrying a different large red jar of liquid. This is more like viscousy. You can tell it's not blood. And he goes to duck in another room, but watches what's happening. And he also comes across a bunch of this red stuff in syringes, and he takes one. And as soon as the doctor leaves, we then hear a woman's voice. This creeps me out every time, and I always forget it's coming. She's asking for help, though. And he's trying to find where she is, because we don't see a person, and we don't see a body. And he kind of pulls back this curtain, and it's just a head with a vertebrae attached. And it's clearly conscious, because she is talking and looking around. And that is
She's just
terrifying.
Yelling, please, in French. Just please, please.
Yep. So gross. And this is when I made the note that we're only halfway through the movie. Boyce loses his shit, though, at this point, because that is terrifying to see. But just then he turns around, and this is when he finds Jacob. And he is strapped to a table with, again, that huge, like, hose mask thing strapped to his face. And there's another hose coming out of him, which is important here in a second. And just as he runs over to try to help him, the doctor comes back in again. He injects another soldier kind of strapped to a table, but it's upright with that red stuff. And then he moves the table into what is, the only way I can describe it, is a morgue locker where they put dead bodies. He leaves again, and Boyce goes to help Jacob. He removes the mask, and then, unfortunately, though, whatever's in his stomach is, one, hooking him up to something and pumping something in him. But two, it has a giant
It's like
stabby thing.
Giant needle, like a foot long, just going right into him.
Right into his body, and he has to pull that out. So he's like, sorry, man. Puts his hand over his mouth. He's like, I gotta get this out of you, though. So, obviously that's very painful, too. But they do make it out of the lab, and Boyce is basically carrying him. So he has to scramble to find a way out. Because we do start to hear the soldiers yelling. They've obviously at this point realized someone is there. So they do find a small, like, storm drain. And they both make it safely into there. And this leads to the sewers, which slowly leads back out to the village where they can get out back to Chloe's house. We cut back to the attic with Tibbet and the rest of the guys, and they're basically just waiting for Boyce to get back. Paul tries on Tibbet's helmet and kind of starts imitating Tibbet, which is cute.
Tibbet's just not having it. It's like this annoying little fuck just following me around.
He puts on a very tough guy persona for the most part, definitely. But Chase takes some pictures of that. Then we see asshole Sergeant Nazi is tied up again, but there's a hood over his face at this point. And Chase goes to get close to him, and he kind of, like, grunts awake a little bit, so that scares Chase back. Just then we hear Boyce come charging in the house yelling for help, and he has Jacob with him, and of course he's hurt and needs help and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And with obviously the huge gaping wound in his gut as well.
Yeah.
That's probably bleeding out for sure. Ford's like, how did you get him? How did you know, what happened? And Boyce is like, he just keeps yelling, there's dead bodies everywhere. They're doing experiments on people. And Ford's like, breathe. What are you talking about? And he's like, did you get eyes on the tower compound? And he nods. And again, he just tries to tell Ford there's so much more going on down there. And then he pulls out the syringe with the red shit in it. And they're all like, what the fuck is this? So they all go back up to the attic and unmask asshole Nazi and ask him what this shit is, basically. And at first he says, I don't know, I'm just a soldier. And Ford's like, well, I don't think my friend here believes you, because he's flipping out saying there's bodies everywhere and they're doing experiments up there. And he laughs, and then Ford kicks him right in the mouth, which, holy fuck, that would hurt so bad.
Yeah. This is just the first time that this guy's jaw gets completely fucked up.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely dislocated, if not broken, for sure. So then he basically is like, look, we're all serving a purpose. And then he turns to Chloe and totally goats her by talking shit about her aunt and her family. And she just runs up and stabs him in the leg, which, good for you.
Yeah.
I do the same. Ford then is like, well, we don't need this red shit. That's not why we're here. And tosses it kind of behind him, but then twists the knife further into his leg, and good for you. Asshole Nazi is basically like, fuck you. And then Ford tells them, the other guys, to hoist them up. And Boyce at this point is kind of protesting, like, hey, this isn't the mission. We don't need to do this. And Ford's like, I don't care, and just starts beating this dude's ass.
Yeah.
So
Ford is the character that has clearly been through the shit already and is just kind of tired of everything and is just kind of letting out all of his frustrations at this point.
Of course. Well, and I'll get into it more in fun facts because, again, the historical aspect of this movie is true. I can't imagine what certain people saw during that war, because the Nazis were doing completely fucked up shit to people.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe he's seen a bunch of it at this point. It's just like, fuck them. I'm going to torture them when I can. And again, I say, good for you.
Yeah.
Tibbet kind of pushes Boyce downstairs, though, and he does end up going downstairs with Chloe. And you can obviously hear Ford just hammering away at this guy up there. Which, by the way, he kept talking about how they got to, like, get him out of there and stuff. How are you going to explain this? Like, were you just going to kill him? I guess that was the point. To try to kill him, I guess, at first. I don't know. Boyce and Chloe kind of talk about how, you know, they don't really know themselves anymore. They've been through a lot of trauma, obviously. So this is, you know, it's sad. They're just sad people in general. Ford then comes downstairs and says, well, he gave us some information. There's at least 40 of them in the tower, if we believe him. And Ford is still kind of sticking with the original plan of essentially, like, breaching this fortress from the outside to get in, which is not a good plan. But long enough to just, you know, blow up the tower, which, again, I say, just a terrible plan. This wasn't going to work. He then asks Chloe if she has a vehicle, and he's like, and you won't get it back, so just to throw that out there. Chloe says, yeah, my dad kept a car in the garage, and he says, take me to it. And then he tells Chase, of all people, to go untie the asshole Nazi and get him ready to move.
Yeah.
Right. By himself. This was a terrible idea and a terrible plan.
Right.
Because unfortunately, Chase goes up to the attic. He pulls out a gun, which is smart. Lets the guy down. He doesn't move.
Of course, lets his guard down.
Right. Lets his guard down. And, of course, he, like, bum rushes him. He starts to yell. Chase starts to yell for help. But then he shoots Chase. Of course, because he got the gun. Because he's also way bigger than Chase.
Yeah.
They all come running up to the attic and subdue him again. They try to help Chase, but he's shot, like, 5 times. He's fucking dead, for sure. I also really respect the death scene in this movie when it comes to the actual people in this movie, because it looks very real. It's very graphic, and we see the bullet holes bleeding, and we hear his wheezing because he's clearly shot in the lungs and he's internally bleeding. So it's just well done as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, the thing is with some of like the actual deaths in this movie, I feel like it doesn't have a lot of, there doesn't feel like a lot of emotional toll when a character dies, because there's not like that relationship that you create with them the same way, like the same way that you feel when characters die in, say, Saving Private Ryan, where it's a little bit more drawn out. There's a lot more emotion behind it. These, it's kind of like, okay, they're dead and that's it. Or it's, they're dead, all right, we'll give you like 5 seconds to have a decently heartwarming moment, and that's pretty much it.
Agreed.
Another thing that I wish they could have elaborated on a little bit more. I've been very critical of this movie so far, but I do love it. I just need to put that out there.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I think there's, especially when we talk about Nazis, again, I'm going to go on another Nazi tangent. There's good and there's Nazis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those are your characters in the movie. There's the good guys and there's the Nazis. That's really it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is no real character building aside from, I guess, Boyce and maybe Ford a little bit because of the third act, but there's not any.
I think it's because there also like wasn't much of a relationship that we kind of got to see evolve over time with these characters like you do in other war movies, because these were all people that were given Boyce shit on the plane, and they're kind of like, they're not really they weren't tight-knit friends going into this whole thing. They were kind of just on the same team and kind of just met back up. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Now clearly, based on the trauma they go through, they bond because of that.
Absolutely.
There's really nothing ahead of time for sure as far as a relationship goes. Mm-hmm. But Chase dies. Super sad. And then Tibbet wants to kill asshole Nazi, of course. Mm-hmm. But Ford is like, no, we need him. Just then, Boyce sees the red syringe on the ground, though, and he just stabs it into Chase, willy-nilly. Think about what you do for a second.
Yeah. Assuming he probably just went off of, remember seeing the doctor stab the dead body with the syringe and then seeing the body kind of reanimate.
But that was it. He didn't see anything aside from there was a dead
shoulder,
body.
A little shoulder movement, and then they put him into a morgue.
Right.
Yeah.
But he was also strapped down.
Yeah.
So didn't you think maybe this wasn't the best plan? Well, none of them think that's going to work anyway. And for a second, yes, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. And they all kind of start to get to work to moving the guy. But just then, Chase sits straight fucking up, still wheezing. Mm-hmm. They all freak out.
I do love this scene. Yeah.
This is excellently done for sure. Chase says he's thirsty. So Ford hands him a canteen full of water and asks him how he feels, because you can see the blood still coming out of the bullet holes. I mean, there's no good way to describe that. Mm-hmm. Jason's like, I feel fine. Nothing really even hurts. And then he smashes the metal canteen, which is not normal, obviously. Ford then says, Chase, can you stand up? And he says, yeah. And he pops right up. Mm-hmm. And then he starts saying it's super hot in here. He takes off his shirt, still bleeding everywhere. Says, my head hurts. And then his arm, we can see kind of start to mutate. Yeah. Initially, just his veins, but then his whole arm. And then we'll see it spread to his whole body. He says his head hurts again, and then he just starts beating it into this wooden pole.
Yeah.
This creates a chain effect, and he snaps his head back, and his neck bones come shooting out of the front of his neck. And gross.
Apparently,
the whole thing's gross.
They did like some actual puppetry and practical like prosthetics. Yeah,
that's one of my fun facts, because it's
and it
very
looks
well done.
It looks amazing.
It does. It looks like those bones are really coming out of him, for sure. Boyce then tries to help him, because, his head's, like, flopping all over the place. Mm-hmm. And then Chase just starts screaming at him at the top of his lungs, like, what did you do to me? So Ford's like, yeah, fuck this, and just mows him down with a machine gun. Mm-hmm. So then he basically screams at asshole Nazi, he's like, what just happened? This is not normal. And the Nazi says things that you hear a lot of times in Nazi films. Well, this is the 1,000-year Reich, and it needs 1,000-year soldiers. Just then, Chase gets back up again. But this time, Boyce kind of hits him with the butt of his rifle and just keeps hitting his head until it's basically mush.
Yeah.
So he can't get up again.
This is kind of Boyce's breaking point to where he's just like, the guy who went from not being able to hurt a mouse to now having to put down one of his friends now.
Yeah,
so
for sure. You see the turn very quick, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tibbet then starts just yelling, someone tell me what the fuck's going on. And, at this point, asshole Nazi escapes. He also grabs Paul as he runs out of the house into a waiting truck that's outside because obviously they heard all the gunfire. All the American soldiers are shooting after him, of course, the whole time. And Ford does manage to come out from behind, I think, the house and shoots him in the face area, face neck. So that's fucked up now.
Yeah.
Not to mention how fucked up he was from getting his ass beat for probably, I don't know, an hour.
Right.
Let's say.
Apparently the actor, I'm going to butcher his name, but the guy who plays the Nazi captain, Pilau Asbeck? I don't know.
Okay.
Apparently it was like 5 hours just to get that prosthetic on every day of just like, because it looked like the half of his face had just been completely blown out.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, really well done. I'm sure there's a mix of practical and CGI for that, too.
Yeah. Apparently a majority of the effects were done practically, like they did as much practically as they can, and just kind of, didn't have heavy visual effects. I mean, there were 4 different visual effects teams that works on this movie.
Oh, wow.
Including ILM, or, Industry Light and Magic, which is, one of the biggest VFX companies in the world. And has done stuff like worked on, the Star Wars movies, a bunch, worked very close. I think was previously owned by George Lucas at the time, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you can tell.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of moments in this movie where you would need special effects, I don't think. But when it's there, it's good for sure.
Yeah. Because, I mean, pretty much, because they ended principal photography in January of 2018. This movie came out in November of 2018. So less than, 11 months to do all post-production and editing and visual effects. And I have a feeling that a majority of it just went into that and not a ton into marketing. Hence why we, mentioned why it didn't seem like there was almost any marketing for this movie other than like maybe a trailer that would be viewed every once in a while. But it didn't seem like a lot of time was put into the actual marketing.
Look that up while I keep going, because I am interested to see if we can find a marketing budget for this. For sure. Ford now at this point is like, fuck, we gotta move. And Boyce and him kind of get into a screaming match because Paul was this is their fault. Like, Paul would not have been taken if they weren't here. So we should help Chloe and get her brother back. And Ford's like, no, that's not our job. And there's a back and forth. And he's trying to also tell Ford, I can get us inside. We can blow it up from the inside, destroy all the labs and everything that's in there. And this would be safer than your plan of like hot rodding it and going in the front door, which isn't smart. Tibbet kind of chimes in at this point and says, look, Boyce is right. This would be more stealthy and we can grab the kid as a bonus. So Ford then says, all right, well, if we do this, our chances of walking out of there are nearly 0. And Boyce is like, I'll get you in there. It'll be fine. And they all agree to go with his plan at this point. We now cut to inside the lab where asshole Nazi just starts stabbing himself with this red stuff. I think he does it at least twice, maybe 3 times. But the doctor's yelling at him to stop because this is not safe and he shouldn't be doing that. We then immediately see him change, though, and even though his face is blown off, it tries to heal itself, but it can't, so that just leaves it blown off and fucked up looking, and it's pretty gross and terrifying, for sure. We then see all the American soldiers and Chloe walking toward the tower. They all kind of try to make a plan on how they're going to get in. Chloe is helping them at this point, which is, I think, pretty cool. At first, she didn't have to. Tibbet says this would have made a hell of a chapter in Dawson's book. So again, there's those bonds starting to form that we talked about earlier. Again, trauma bonding probably is abound. Then we cut to Chloe, who is luring the other asshole Nazi that held a gun to her face earlier. But he's on a motorcycle, so she's running and he's trying to catch her. And just as he kind of corners her, Ford hits him in the face. And they tie him to his motorcycle and tape his mouth shut and tape his hands on the handlebar and then aim him right for the tower. And you see him, riding up there. He's starting to yell. And just as another soldier pulls off the duct tape, it's got the grenade pin in it. And that goes off, blowing his head off, and the bombs in the back of his motorcycle as well. Huge explosion.
This scene is great because it's just seeing a bunch of Nazis just get absolutely obliterated. First by the explosion, and then they all start to rush out the door, and Jacob just completely mows them down with a 30 cal or 50 cal or whatever it is. But it's so good. It
is good. It's a good plan.
Yeah.
This is definitely a good plan. Because we then see Boyce and Ford making their way through the sewers to get into the tower. And again, Jacob and Tibbet are outside, mowing them down as they come from outside the door. Chloe is inside then with them, and she kind of goes off on her own, which Boyce tries to stop her, but, whatever. She wasn't going to listen to them anyway. She comes across two soldiers walking around and asks where her brother is. One guy says, I don't know, so she just shoots him in the head, which, that's a good tactic. The second guy says, okay, I'll show you. We then see a guy, and he's in the communications part, and he's trying to radio for help, but just then Ford comes up behind him and stabs him right in the neck. That also looks really well done. Mm-hmm. Again, the whole thing, just really well done. He tells Boyce to go ahead to the lab and start rigging explosives, and they'll have 18 minutes because all the American boats are due on the beach in 20, so they got to get out of there. We cut back to Chloe and the other soldier, and he's taking her down to where we see those cells before with the peepholes, and he's telling her brother's in there. She slowly starts to open the door with the gun still pointed on him, but just trying to whisper for Paul, but of course he's not in there. Just then, Boyce pops out, hits that dude in the head with his gun, and tells Chloe, no, he's not in there. And as they run away, we just see the soldier who has fallen to the ground get pulled into the cell. He screams, and we assume he's dead now at this point. Then, just for a second, we see this zombie. He is in shadow, but then he just has this, real guttural scream, which is also terrifying.
And I think this is supposed to be the same zombie or character maybe as the guy that Boyce saw in the peephole the first time around when he was in the castle.
I would assume. Yeah, for sure. Because I kind of breezed over this, but when he first looks in that peephole, Boyce, it's a regular person.
Yeah.
And then they open, and you can hear another door opening and then the scream, so I think they're just feeding that one.
Yeah.
Boyce takes Chloe to the bottom of the lab, and he says this is where Jacob was, so maybe Paul will be down here too. And yes, they find Paul. He is down there. He tells her and Paul to get out of there. He has to finish, doing all this stuff and rigging these explosives. But not before we see a flash of someone kind of run behind Boyce as Chloe and Paul leave. So we're not sure who's in that room at the moment. Chloe and Paul make it back to the sewer, but just as she tells Paul to go, that zombie fucking thing grabs her head and rips her out of there, tossing her a good, I think, 10 feet, And again, let's pause for a second, describe this zombie, because he is a little different than our traditional zombies.
Yeah.
He is not, molting away.
Yeah. He's still clearly got some scarring from what looked like, he might have gone through something similar that we saw Chase go through with the mutation.
Yeah.
But overall is kind of well pieced together. There's not a lot of decaying or it's like if you took the vampire creatures from I Am Legend and mix them with like the zombies from 28 Days Later.
Right, because they're very violent.
Yeah.
They're fast, bloodthirsty for sure, and they look pretty human.
Yeah.
He is missing an arm, though. He's got like a stub of a hand arm on one side. But again, yeah, just they look pretty human for sure. But they are fast as fuck.
Yeah.
Because that's the next thing we see is her trying to just get away from him. He is running after her. And he also, after he has thrown her, punches a huge hole in the concrete wall right next to her because she kind of ducks out of the way. And she does manage to shoot him a few times, but that does not slow him down one bit. She does end up making her way back out towards the front, and we can see him running towards her at that point. And this is when she comes across the flamethrowers, which is really cool.
Yeah,
it's a cool scene.
It is.
Because again, just as he kind of pops out of there, she mows him down with the flamethrower, and that stops him. We then cut back to Ford, and he's setting the timers up in the tower. And, oh shit, asshole zombie's back.
Yeah.
And he, again, tosses Ford, just like the other zombie just tossed Chloe, like a fucking pillow.
Yeah.
Like just, you're nothing.
Kudos to that stunt team for crashing through against those, all that glass. And there's one scene where he throws Boyce into just, like, the railing of the giant pit, and you just, like, can feel his back just hitting those poles.
Well, there's my favorite horror podcast, Horror Virgin. I'll shout them out. They're also in our fun fact sources. There's a running joke because in one of the episodes, I think it's the Insidious episode, Rose Byrne gets hit with a plate or something by one of the demons or ghosts, and you hear this, like, swing, like, it's not a sound effect that belongs there whatsoever. But when Boyce hits that rail, you hear the same sound. Like, the metal made more noise than the human hitting it. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's exactly what happens for sure. Asshole zombie smashes his timer, though, unfortunately, with his bare hands. Womp womp. We then see Boyce again rigging more explosives in the lab, but then that fucking goddamn doctor sneaks out from nowhere and tries to stop him. This is cutting back and forth between asshole Nazi fighting Ford and Boyce fighting the doctor. But Boyce eventually stabs the doctor in the neck and kills him, so we're fine there. We then briefly cut outside to Tibbet and Jacob, who are again trying to hold the rest of the Nazis off, but they gotta run. There's just nothing else they can do. They kind of make it back towards the village, and then we see poor little Paul running down the street, and he gets kind of caught in the gunfire. And Tibbet rushes out to save him.
Yeah.
Because now he's bonded with this little boy.
Yeah.
And it's cute. And unfortunately, he gets shot in the shoulder, which sucks as well. But Chloe shows up and she finishes shooting the rest of the soldiers that were chasing them. So the village is pretty much safe at this point. Jacob then asks if she saw Ford or Boyce, and she shakes her head no. We cut back inside the tower and we see Ford and asshole Nazi again fighting. And this is probably the hardest scene of the movie, in my opinion, because he takes a huge metal fish hook and just jams it right into his
like up his rib cage, and you can just feel it as it. Imagine being hung by your rib cage,
right? By a metal hook.
Yeah.
Terrible.
God.
Yeah, and he hoists him up too. So not only did you just get stabbed in your rib cage, but then you're dangling all the weight on your
just
body.
Just being pulled.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is now on that rib cage. I would die. I would just immediately go into shock and die. There's no way I'd survive something like that. He then starts talking about the serum and stuff and calls himself a god, blah, blah, blah. But just then Boyce pops up and shoots him a bunch of times. But obviously that doesn't take him down either. He again tosses Boyce like a rag doll.
Yeah.
Yep, they're just flinging him left and right. As he goes after Boyce, Ford, though, some fucking how pulls this hook out of his ribcage and grabs some red stuff and shoots himself up with it. Last ditch effort, I guess, to try to stay alive.
Yeah.
Asshole zombie then starts opening some of those morgue lockers we saw earlier, and he tries to drown Boyce in this like bathtub with, I'm assuming, body parts in it because it's bloody and
human soup.
Fucking
yeah,
fucking gross. Ford comes up behind him though and stabs him literally through his body with this huge metal pole that was just laying there or something. I don't even know where it came from, but he pulls it right back out and still does not slow down whatsoever. Ford though is now all souped up on the red juice, and they kind of fight some more for a bit. He then gets tossed again, and he rolls into some, I think they're oxygen tanks.
Yeah.
I would assume that's what they are down there. And just as asshole Nazi is going to probably kill Ford, he rolls over and Boyce shoots one of the cans propelling Nazi asshole into that tar pit, body pit, whatever you want to call it thing. This is when I noted, okay, I'm seeing it was a disposal for body parts. Because I think I saw like a foot or something, and I was like, ooh, forgot about that. Ford also gets tossed a bit from that explosion, but he's alive. Boyce picks him up, and he tries to head out of the lab, but Ford kind of pushes him through the gate and then locks it behind him. And Boyce is like, yo, what are you doing? You got to get out of here. We only have like, I don't know how many minutes. And Ford's like, I didn't get the timers set. I have to set them myself. So you're going to have to get out of here, basically. And he is like, I knew I wouldn't be getting out of here alive. So, you know,
and he's like,
yells at him to leave. Whatever
this is shouldn't be on our side either.
Exactly. No side should have this, is I think what he says, for sure. We then see the fucking asshole zombie climbing out of that pit.
Yeah.
And more zombies waking up from the morgue lockers. Ford lights a brick of C4 with the Nazi lighter from earlier. And the whole lab blows up. Boyce makes it out of the tower just in time.
With a really excellent, again, single shot of him just going through each hallway as the building collapses. Which is really solid.
Yeah, really good for sure. Even like the dust and everything that comes up in that plume after him just looks very real. For sure. We cut to Paul and Tibbet, Chloe, and Jacob kind of listening to the radio. It is morning at this point. The Allies did make it to the beach, and they are invading France. The other villagers are now starting to come out of their house, and we see Boyce kind of stumble back into the village, and he's alive. He makes his way to a bench, and we see Tibbet ask about Ford, and he just shakes his head no, unfortunately, and stares out into the distance. We then see Boyce recounting what happened in the tower to, obviously, some sort of superior. Kind of explains how everything came about. And, you know, Corporal Ford thought it was best if they entered this way and instead of breaching from whatever angle he initially thought. This superior then asks about rumors of a lab, and Boyce just says, nope, we didn't find anything down there, just the communications booth, and took it out like we were told to do so. So he says, all right, well, y'all can take a breath, but you're being folded into Charlie Company. So Boyce makes it back to Tibbet and Jacob and tells them the same thing. They're being folded into C Company. And Tibbet says, Jesus, really? I thought they just sent us the fuck home after this. Which they totally should.
Now, if Boyce was able to tell the truth as to what actually happened, which I understand why he didn't, because he doesn't want them going around trying to discover what they were doing.
Dig through that rubble.
Yeah, discover what they were doing and then try to replicate it themselves, which is very much a U.S. thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So.
Boyce then says, nope, we got a job to finish. We got to get you to Hitler so you can kill him. And we kind of pull back and see the village. Again, it's kind of being liberated. There's American soldiers. And that's the movie.
That's the movie. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
I wish it was either a lot shorter or a lot longer. And I feel like a big reason as to why it feels so slow in the first half of this movie is how linear the storytelling is in this movie. Because I feel like we only cut to... Like, it pretty much only follows the soldiers throughout the entire movie. and I think there's only one scene where it actually cuts to like the Nazis' perspective while they're not, with the soldiers, and that's when asshole Nazi Waffner manages to get back to the lab and injects himself with the serum. I think that's the only time that we actually see what's going on in the labs outside of when the soldiers discover what's going on. So I feel like if they had mixed that a little bit more into the beginning and kind of did a little bit more setup, I think that it would have helped with how slow the beginning feels. But yeah, so.
Yeah. No, fair enough. For sure. I don't mind the pace of the movie.
Yeah.
Again, I, like I said earlier, I think it's a Nazis versus us thing, so I didn't really care that I didn't learn anything about them. Because fuck Nazis.
Fuck Nazis.
I'm saying it again. Do you have any more fun facts?
I was not able to get like a definitive answer on what the marketing budget for this movie was. I did see that there was an overall budget of about 38 million, and the film only grossed to about 41 to 42 million. So it was kind of a box office bomb.
For sure.
Which I have to say was likely because there was not a lot of marketing behind the film other than a few trailers here and there. Because I
did you watch a trailer though?
Yeah.
If I'm remembering, there's not a lot of mention of zombies, right?
I know. I remember it is like it's kind of vague. I didn't watch the trailer while you were talking, but I remember seeing the trailer for it and it being kind of vague as to what the actual enemy was. But I kind of got the gist of it, that it was some kind of monster mutant thing that was going on.
Okay.
But yeah, so. Especially because, like, I mean, I don't know. The Nazi zombie thing has already been done before by a Norwegian film crew, and it was a series of films called Dead Snow. But they were...
Oh, God. Have you seen any of those?
Yes, I have. And they are very different in terms of tone compared to this movie. Dead Snow is a lot more comedic and very heavily leans into that. This really... while Overlord does, of course, have its moments where it makes you chuckle here and there, it's a lot more dramatic. And so I don't know.
And big budget.
Yeah.
This is a big budget film. Dead Snows, all of them are definitely B movies.
Right.
I'd say even C, some of them.
And
so, yeah.
I've seen some people make the argument that because of how much Overlord bombed that it is, and like the concept and how like kind of over the top it is with mixing, horror, action, thriller, drama all into one, it is kind of like a B movie in a sense, which I have a hard time seeing that given the budget and given the names that were behind it. J.J. Abrams, basically one of the biggest, names in sci-fi right now. So, but yeah, I think that
what's this?
If there was a little bit more marketing behind it, I think if maybe not to say, I think it was cast very well. I think everybody did a phenomenal job, but I think if we had a few more big name actors, because Wyatt Russell had been in a few things that, already, I feel like, his big thing, he's Kurt Russell's son is kind of, not to say that he's a bad actor at all or anything like that, but.
No, he's actually really good.
But I think if they, did a little bit more into marketing, maybe a few bigger names, then I think it could have done better, because it's a great movie, but I think I think this might have been, I don't know, because if you look at Old Guard, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff for that, and interviews with the cast, and a lot of promotional material for that movie. You look this up, you'll maybe find one or two actual cast interviews, and then some behind the scenes camera stuff, but not a lot of here's 10 things you didn't know about 2018's Overlord kind of thing,
Right.
So
no, that's true. I had to dig.
Yeah.
I had to dig to find some of my fun facts for sure.
Yeah. Let's see.
Was this based on a video game, or am I crazy?
I mean, there's Call of Duty Nazi Zombies, which is a game mode in Call of Duty World at War where you just have to... It's like waves of zombies that you have to defend yourself from.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what I was thinking of then.
It's... a lot of people thought that this was the 4th installment in the Cloverfield series of movies.
I did read
which
that.
was quickly debunked by Abrams in 2018 CinemaCon, where he clearly stated that this was not part of that series, which
Right.
makes sense because I think the whole thing. I think they kind of. I've only seen the first Cloverfield movie. I didn't see.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't see 10 Cloverfield Lane or Cloverfield Paradox, but from my understanding, that deals with more like giant alien monsters
aliens
that have. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think people just saw that it's like, oh well, Abrams is behind it, so it must be a Clover. It's like, well, I don't see. I can't say I followed that logic all too well, but,
No.
but yeah, that's pretty much what I got.
I found a couple random out there. This movie ignores racial stereotypes for the time.
Right.
Obviously, there's African Americans, there's women in this movie, so probably were not prevalent back then, which is cool, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason not to include black members of your cast,
Right.
of course.
I think because I don't think it was like enforced until the like Korean, like post-Korean War, early Vietnam War, that you actually saw African American soldiers and Caucasian soldiers actually working together and being on the same team.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's given the source, given what we're working with here in terms of a plot. I don't think it takes too much out of the movie to have both black actors and white actors, being in the same team in a World War II film. I think it's fine.
For sure. It fits
Yeah.
very well. Obviously, the whole narrative of Nazis doing experiments on humans in this era is based in truth, which I think we all know by now.
Yeah.
Experiments being done in concentration camps, as well as private labs popping up all over Germany for even years after Hitler had died. The whole reason that we have animal protection laws around the world for research is because of trials that Germans did during World War II on animals.
Yeah.
So it's gross. They're terrible people.
Nazis, not Germans.
Nazis.
Specifically
not Germans.
Nazis.
The German people are probably lovely. Never been there, but I'd love to go. Like we said, Wyatt Russell, who is Corporal Ford, is Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn's son. He had mono almost the entire time shooting this fucking film.
Lost like 25 pounds or something like that throughout the course of that.
Damn it would be rough. Yeah.
What a trooper.
I had mono twice in high school. Twice in high school in a 4-year period. And I was down for like 3 months each time.
Really?
I also lost a lot of weight.
What is mono exactly? Is it like, from my understanding, it's like pneumonia to a certain extent, or like worse?
Yeah, it's a viral thing. Basically, you have the most extreme fatigue you've ever had in your life. It can develop into like a pneumonia bronchitis, but that's kind of rare.
Okay.
It's mostly just that fatigue. I think I slept, my mom said, 2 or 3 weeks straight. Like I'd get up, go to the bathroom, and maybe eat a little bit, but go right back to bed and sleep for days and days on end. So I can't imagine how he was doing all this shit with mono. 'Cause that's insane. We did talk about the CGI effects and of course that amazing neck snap that Chase does with the puppetry and everything else, and the makeup for the asshole Nazi, which is wonderful. The first sequence, which has the soldiers jumping out of the plane, we also kind of talked about, but you didn't mention this part, and I thought it was pretty cool because I watched a little, it's not a video of what actually happened, but this guy on YouTube showed like how it would happen with like a model plane, which I thought was cool. And the way they like tilted it up an actual plane, think about this, a decommissioned plane, they tilted it, and so some of the soldiers, or stuntmen, I should say, were actually tumbling through fire and down the air. So that's crazy. We also talked about codename Operation Overlord actually was referred to as D-Day, and that's when 156,000 Americans arrived at France and took down the Nazis in France. The plaque on the wall of the lab, that you kind of pan over to it when Boyce first enters the lab, is Al Pascal Moreau, which is actually a homage to very famous scientists connected to the plot. So Al refers to Albert Einstein, obviously a world-renowned physicist, and who did go on to develop the atomic bomb that was dropped in World War II. Yeah. Blaise Pascal was a 17th century French mathematician and scientist who invented the syringe. So obviously that is used a lot in the movie. And Maru is a fictional scientist, but he comes from a H.G. Wells novel, The Island of Dr. Moreau, and he is the first character in horror. So this came out in roughly the 20s, where they use vivisection to create hybrid creatures and cut people open. Which, if you don't know what vivisection is, don't Google it. It's gross. Just know it's gross. And finally, the French woman whose head we see attached to her vertebrae but nothing else. I'll try to say this correctly. I'm sure I'll butcher it. But she repeats over and over, "Atrise s'il vous plaît," which is English for "please stop, please stop." So that's also very terrifying. Yeah. That she just kept saying that over and over again. And those are my fun facts.
All right. Good stuff. Good movie.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, I think...
I'm so glad you picked this.
Yeah, me too. This is good going back to it.
For sure.
Yeah.
As always, follow us on all the things, Instagram, YouTube. Like and subscribe where you're hearing this, of course. That would be great.
Absolutely. Feel free to let us know what movies you feel like we should review in future episodes. So what do you got going on for next week? Or next
we're
episode.
Completely turning it back to our list, and we're doing St. Elmo's Fire.
St. Elmo's Fire. All right. I've never...
I believe that's a John Hughes movie? Question mark? I think it's in his, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club. I'm pretty sure it's a John Hughes.
Gotcha.
So.
All right.
It's pretty good. Spoiler alert and trigger warning. There's some rape in there.
Ah. All right.
We're going back to the 80s, so it's in there.
Damn it. All right.
But overall, it's a really great film. I think you're really going to like it.
All right. Well, hopefully I enjoy it. Maybe, I don't know if I could enjoy it as much as Overlord. I don't know if I could enjoy anything as much as Overlord, but...
Hey, the old guard's literally in my top 5, so I get it.
All right, well, that's going to be about it for this episode of the Cult Cinema Podcast. Thank you again, everybody, for watching and listening, and we will see you in the next one.